Us. Sorry, start over. Hey, thank you everybody for joining us for the Michigan First Mortgage virtual home buying seminar. My name is Tom Regan. I am the mortgage manager in the West Side, and I'm filling in for Dan Sugg today while he's gone, but he will be back soon. So again, just want to say thank you for being here and taking a little time out of your day to join us as we talk about appraisals and inspections. And what they are and the cost and why do we need them and all the questions that we get kind of on a daily basis. So I'm going to just jump right in, but I want to introduce our panel today. Blaine Fyan is here as our resident expert on the appraisal side. So we appreciate him being here, and I'm just going to have he and Scott maybe take a minute or two to introduce themselves and tell us who they are. But I'm going to embarrass Blaine before we get started. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go ahead with Scott. Sounds like he's up first. So Scott, let's go ahead and take a minute or two and just tell us who you are.
Okay. Thank you, Tom, for inviting me on the call. As Tom said, my name is Scott Young. I'm a loan officer here at Michigan First Mortgage. I've been in banking for over 30 years. As you can see on my bio, I have a lot of experience in different areas in banking. But what I will say is, out of all the jobs that I've had, being a mortgage loan officer has been the most rewarding. Every member has a different mortgage, different need, and there's so many different types of mortgages that I'm very analytical, and everybody that knows me knows that. I take it as a personal challenge to help members find and understand the best options that guide them through from start to finish. You can see I was a air traffic controller years ago in the Air Force. Been married 23 years to my wonderful wife, Jennifer. I have 21-year-old twins, a 14-year-old, and education. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree from Grand Valley State University.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you being here today. So next up is Blaine Fyan. He's a appraiser on the West Side. He owns the Real Value Group, and I've known Blaine for quite a few years. And I won't date him. I don't want to say how many years because we're both on the downside, I think. But anyway, would just appreciate him being here. And is when I think of a resident expert in appraisal, it's definitely Blaine. I mean, he is very active in the community, very active in the industry, mentors a lot of appraisers, and he truly is the expert. So Blaine, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Tom, thank you. Appreciate that. I'll go ahead and date myself. I'm 53 years old. I think, Tom, you and I go back at least 20 of those 53 years or pretty close to that, which I'm honored, super honored to be here. So yeah, this is my 22nd year in the appraisal side of things, but 30 plus years in real estate altogether, because just before becoming an appraiser, I was a loan originator for 4 years. And then before that, I was a realtor for 5 years. So all in all, something like 31 years. And I'm a residential and commercial investor as well. So bought my first house at 18, a duplex, and have been buying and investing ever since. I like to think that I kind of speak the language of the real estate transaction since I participated in all of it. But yeah, just honored to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Well, we appreciate you being here. So thank you. So I think we're going to jump right into it. So the seminar today is about appraisals versus inspections. What are they? And we do get a lot of questions on this on a day-to-day basis. All of our loan officers do. So I think we're going to start out with Blaine. What is an appraisal? Just, give us a little high level overview of that.
Sure. Yeah. Quite simply, an appraisal is an opinion of value. Key being it's an opinion. You call 10 appraisers, you'll get 10 different opinions, but hopefully they'll be within a narrow window, fairly close, because that's the way real estate works. People don't necessarily pay a sticker price. There's always a range or a window of values. And the appraiser is a licensed and trained individual that goes out and kind of reports on what the market says the value should be for that particular asset, in this case, a house. So quite simply, it's an opinion of value on a piece of real estate.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So Scott, I'm going to jump over to you too. So that's what an appraisal is. Why do we need one on the lending side?
Well, we need to find the value of the property, and that's what we're basing the loan on. So most of the time, a standard loan is going to be 80% of the appraised value or the purchase price, whichever is lower.
Absolutely. So yeah, we definitely need to know that as we're lending our money, that the collateral is there, that is, has enough value to, meet the value of our loan amount. So, definitely that's what we need. So, and Scott, while you're here, what is an inspection? You know, how is that different from an appraisal?
So a home inspection is a visual assessment of a house's safety and quality by a home inspector. The inspector is looking for potential problem areas in the home. They're evaluating the condition of the home. It's normally not required, but I strongly recommend that buyers purchase the home inspection. So it's something that they would order themselves, but to me, it's well worth the money. If nothing serious is found, you at least have peace of mind when you're buying the house that the inspection came back great. If there's areas of concern, you'll be aware of that, and then you can proceed accordingly.
So awesome. So that kind of leads into the next question. I mean, we need to know, the home inspection is going to tell us what the condition of the home is, but Blaine, I'll have you jump in. I mean, what do you do during your appraisal, and don't you do an inspection as well? And
Yeah,
how,
great.
how is that different than a home inspection?
Yeah, great question. Very common misconception that the appraiser is also inspecting the house. And by the way, before I go into that, couldn't agree with Scott more. For most people, buying a house is the largest single investment that any one of us will make. And for the cost of an inspection, the cost of an appraisal, which are pennies on the dollar for that investment, you don't want to skip those. So an appraiser is looking at the structure of the house, but not the structure. We're looking at the house, we're looking at the condition, the quality of bedrooms, the bathrooms, and we're comparing that in the market to try to determine opinion of value. An actual home inspection is really looking at the structure, meaning the actual poured foundation, the concrete, see if there's any cracks in it. They're looking at the floor joists. They're looking at the electrical panel. They're looking to make sure that all of the features of that house that make it a livable structure are suitable for somebody to go in there and live healthily and safely without there any issues. And they're also looking to make sure that as you referred to it, the collateral or the asset, i.e. the house, is going to be there 10, 20, 30 years from now. That's what an actual home inspector does.
And so differently from what you do, what do you do during that we call it an inspection when you go out there.
Yep.
So you're just basically taking inventory, right?
Yeah, great way to put it. Great way to put it. Yeah, appraiser shows up. They're typically starting on the outside. We take lots of photos of the exterior of the house. We're noting porches and patios and decks. We're noting the condition of the exterior, the siding. We're noting if it has features or doesn't have features like gutters and updated windows, if the roof is dated or if the roof is newer. We're noting all that stuff. And then we knock on the door, take our shoes off. We walk through the interior. Same thing. We're also measuring up with a laser measure so that we can get accurate square footage down to the square foot. So you know exactly how many square feet you have in that house. And then we walk through, we take photos, multiple photos of every room to document, again, the condition, the quality, the bedrooms, the bathrooms, so that you, the lender, and your underwriters, the investors in that property, know exactly what's there without walking through it. That essentially is what an appraiser does.
Perfect. So obviously much different than what the home inspector is doing. So, I mean, the appraiser in a sense is kind of our eyes and ears for the lender. They're out there, they're looking and making sure everything is as far as the market value of the property is there. And so he's putting the estimated value on the property. And then the inspection, Scott, I'm going to jump in with you too.
Yep.
The home inspections. I mean, Blaine, thank you for, jumping in and saying, they're looking at the electrical, the structural, the plumbing, they're looking at the nuts and bolts of the house, but what should we expect from a home inspection?
So the home inspection is going to be more in depth than the appraiser. The appraiser is looking at the value. The home inspector is really looking for what issues are there. They're going to be spending several hours in the house. You will receive a written report once it's completed, but I recommend that you attend the inspection with the inspector, and then they can point out any areas of concern and explain it to you. As Blaine said, they're evaluating several areas. They're gonna look at the exterior, the roof, the siding, the foundation, the interior. They're looking at, are there damaged walls, cabinets, windows, the plumbing. They're gonna check for leaks. They're gonna inspect the pipes. They're gonna look at faucets and toilets. Are they working? Is the sewer system working? A lot of these areas, it's not something that you would just look at yourself when you're going to see the house. When you are looking to buy the house, you're looking at aesthetically, how does it look? The inspector is going in depth. Is everything working? Is it working properly? If it's not, what issues are there? How could it be fixed? They're looking at the electrical, testing outlets and panels, testing and looking at heating and cooling and ductwork. And remember, you're buying this house in different seasons. So if you're buying it in the summertime, you still need to have the furnace checked. You're not going to think of that yourself. If you're buying it in the summertime, all you're worried about at that time is the air conditioning working? The inspector is going to test the smoke detectors, look for any potential fire hazards. It's just a complete inspection, thorough evaluation inside and out of the house.
It's awesome. So, and I'll throw a little color in here. I mean, we have a transaction in our active pipeline right now that the buyer did get an inspection, a home inspection, and it showed that there was asbestos on some of the ductwork in the basement. And obviously, we all know that's a carcinogen and can be a huge hazard for a health hazard. And then there was also that's called knob and tube wiring. It's a kind of an old way of wiring a home. This home was built back in the 1920s. And so it was very common at that point. But both of those things came back on the inspection, and obviously they addressed the asbestos right away. That was encapsulated. They negotiated how to encapsulate that and who would pay for it. But it just gives you an understanding. These home inspections give you a better understanding of what's there in the home, and maybe sometimes things that you might not even know of. Like, I'm not an asbestos expert, so but they identified it and they put it in their report, and then we were able to address it at that point. So next question that sometimes come up is, as a buyer, how does the appraisal or the inspection influence my decision when I'm buying a home? So Blaine, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. So, how would this affect me as a buyer?
Yeah, another great question. And while the buyer can't necessarily choose their own appraiser, they are choosing them in the sense that when they choose a good lender, like you guys have a panel of appraisers that you use, and the quality of those appraisers. But the appraisal is telling the buyer whether or not the asset that they are thinking of investing in, if the market support for that value is there, meaning other similar houses, did other people just like me, the buyer, also pay this much for a similar house? And if the appraiser comes back and says, I just can't find any evidence in the market that it's worth what you're paying, at least it's an eyes wide open scenario. The buyer can say, okay, we're willing to pay that even though there's no proof in the market it's worth this. Or they can say, let's go back to the negotiation table and see if we can negotiate it down to the appraised value. So the appraisal is just there really to help the buyer understand, is the value there for what you're offering? It's also there for the lender to know, is the collateral there in that asset for us to put money on or give a loan for.
So Blaine, I'm going to maybe dig a little deeper on that one. So could that be different? So you're looking for evidence in the market to come up with your value. So could that be different between, a city where there's lots in subdivision where there's lots of homes versus more of a rural setting where, there might only be, 6 homes in this mile span? So
yeah,
address that.
Yeah, great question. The process is exactly the same. It's just that in the city, as you mentioned, we have probably a lot more evidence because there are a lot more homes closer together. And so many more would have sold. So the evidence is there. Where when you start to go out suburban and rural, where there maybe aren't as many sales, we still use the same philosophy. And the philosophy is this: when we are looking at what are potentially comparable sales, we ask ourselves, would a buyer consider this sale a suitable alternative to the one that the buyer wants to buy if that one wasn't available. And so we're looking at things like the lot, the frontage, how big is the property? Does it have the same number of beds and baths, similar condition and quality? And sometimes we have to go out a little farther in rural areas to find comparable sales. And sometimes we have to go back in time a little bit, maybe over a year or 2 or 3 to find similar sales. And then if we do find older sales, we just adjust them for what the market has done in that time. Again, the whole idea is to paint a picture for the buyer and the lender. What are similar buyers like you paying for homes like this in the market over the last year, 2 or 3?
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that can be an art form sometimes, right? Finding those comparable homes.
Part art, part science, we like to say.
There you go.
Yeah.
So Scott, I'm going to throw kind of the same question out to you. As a buyer, how would that home inspection potentially affect my decision?
Well, for the inspection, you're going to get a list of repairs. So that will give you a chance to go back to the seller and negotiate a lower purchase price based on the inspector's findings. I personally, a few years ago, made an offer on a house. I thought everything was fine. The inspector was there for several hours and he ended up finding black mold. And both myself and my son are very allergic to that. So we ended up just canceling the purchase agreement and moving on to a different house. You know, if I wouldn't have had that inspection, we probably would have found out, weeks, months later, why is everybody sick? And for me, it was well worth it. My most recent purchase, we went through, the inspector found some minor issues. We went back and renegotiated the sales price, and we actually got them to reduce it by $3,000. And then we also asked that they put in a new home warranty. Well, the home warranty was for a year. We ended up having the furnace and air conditioner go out within that year, and the home warranty replaced it. So for the $400 or $500 cost that it was for the inspection, I ended up getting probably about $15,000 worth of equipment. So for me, it was well worth it. And I always strongly recommend getting the inspection done. If everything comes back great, it costs you, a few $100s, you got peace of mind. You won't be having buyer's remorse at the end thinking, is something wrong? They do a very thorough job of inspecting the house.
Absolutely. So, and I agree, we definitely do need inspections on the home. I think everybody should have one. And I just want to bring up, I know we've talked about a couple of horror stories here, right? We talked about asbestos, we talked about mold, and those things do happen, but we don't find that it happens all that much. I'm going to say, as far as like the transaction, Scott, that you had that, you decided not to go through with, that's probably less than 1% of the transactions that we see. It doesn't happen a lot, but again, you definitely want to do that inspection just in case it's there. You need to know what the condition of that home is. So,
Well, and it can help you for the future too. If they find something minor, there's a shingle missing or something, it's something that you'll want to address after you buy the house so that it doesn't get worse.
agreed. So yeah, I do think they are important. So Blaine, excuse me. I'm just wondering, as an appraiser and you go out and look at homes that you're doing the inspection, you mentioned that you turn on the utilities and those kind of things when you do the inspection, but do you ever call for an appraisal, or I'm sorry, not an appraisal, an inspection when you're out there?
Yeah, we do. Great question. So as I mentioned earlier, when, the difference between an appraisal and an actual home inspection that Scott just talked about, the appraiser is still looking for real obvious stuff where the inspector is digging in. They're going to go in the attic. They're going to go in the crawl space. They're going to look at every nook and cranny. They're going to climb up on the roof. That's why Scott, he mentions takes 3-4 hours, where an appraisal site visit, we like to call it, so there's no confusion with the inspection. An appraisal site visit is maybe 30 to 40 minutes max. We're just looking at the quality and condition. However, If there's something real obvious that stands out to us, like I mentioned, the foundation, if an appraiser goes in the basement and they see a big 1-inch crack in the foundation, well, then we call that out. And what we do is we say, hey, call somebody much smarter and more qualified than me to look at this, because I'm not a foundation expert. So call an inspector. Or if we look up at the roof on the exterior and we see that it looks like it's 25 years old and there's some missing shingles or something like that, we say, call somebody more qualified than me. And so we will call for an inspection as opposed to maybe calling for a repair. We just say, have a qualified expert come look at this. I noticed this with my eyes, but I'm not trained in this area. Have an inspector or a foundation expert or a roofer or an electrician come look at that. That would be an instance where an appraiser would call for an inspection.
So, and you're out there looking for health and safety issues, right?
Health and safety is a big one. Yep.
So,
Yep.
so thank you for that.
You bet.
So Scott, I'm going to direct this at you. And this is more, mechanical, but who orders the appraisal and who orders the inspections? How does that all play out? Who's responsible for that?
So your lending institution will order the appraisal. You don't want to do that yourself. Since the mortgage crisis years ago, there's so many rules in place that just let us order the appraisal. We have, licensed appraisers. So we will order that once the purchase agreement to buy the house has been signed, and then your application has been started. So it's a specific process along, but we'll take care of that for you and walk you through that. As far as the home inspection, that is the borrower's responsibility. So I would ask, if you're working for a realtor, I would ask your realtor, do you have a name of a good home inspector? If you don't have a realtor, ask us and we can give you some names of good inspectors. And again, it's well worth the money, even though it's not required.
Right. Great advice. So, and I just want to maybe stop there and just reiterate that there is legislation out there through Congress, through the federal government, that says the lender needs to order the appraisal. And there's, regulation that we need to follow to order that appraisal to make sure that we're not any way tampering or coercing the appraiser. We would never do that, right, Blake? So we don't want to do that. But so it's called the AIR or AIR Act. And so as a buyer, you never really want to order the appraisal. We don't want the real estate agents ordering appraisals because it's not going to fulfill the requirements that we have, and we have to warrant for the loan that we're going to deliver. So we always want the lender to be ordering that appraisal. So thanks for that. So Scott, let me ask you, if an appraised value comes in low, what happens? What will we do from there?
So your loan amount is typically based on the lower of the appraised value or the purchase price. So an example, if you have a signed agreement to buy a house for $200,000, it appraises at $195,000, then your loan amount is going to be based on $195,000. So if you're borrowing 80%, which is pretty standard, in that case, you will be responsible to bring in the difference of the $5,000. So if the appraisal does come in low, you've got a few options. The first one, continue with the purchase. You just end up making up the difference. So really that's going to be, how much do you value the house? How low did it come in? If you're buying, $1 million house and it comes in $4,000 or $5,000 short, you're probably good with it. It's like, okay, I'll just make up the difference. The other option, you can just cancel the purchase agreement and look for another house. The third option, which I think is the best, is go back to the seller and renegotiate the purchase price and tell them, I have an appraisal that is this amount. It is based on comps in the area. So, I'm willing to offer you that amount, or, split the difference. Really, it's starting a process over again of negotiating. Most sellers, I think, are going to, you're down the process now, and they have a buyer on the line. They want to sell the house. So most of the time, I think they're willing to negotiate because, they can see the light at the end of the tunnel now where the house is gonna be sold. And especially if they already have another house picked out, they're, they really want to get that house sold. So to me, that's usually the best example. And I usually recommend, if you're worried that it might not appraise, to start thinking about your options ahead of time, that, if it's going to come in light, what are we going to do? Are we going to try to negotiate a lower price? Are we just going to walk away from it? Just to kind of have it in the back of your mind of what your plan of attack is.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So I'm kind of watching the clock here, and I know we're winding down at this point. So if are there any questions in the chat that we need to answer, or do we want to open that up?
There's no questions in the chat box.
Okay, so kind of reiterating what Scott just said. So the appraisal is ordered by the lender. So I'm going to take this opportunity to say the title insurance is also ordered by the lender. And you can pick whoever you want to go through, but this is a shameless plug for Michigan First Title, that we do have our own title company, and we would love to try to keep that in-house. It's just very easy for us as a sister company to order that title insurance and to coordinate your loan. So if there aren't any questions, that kind of wraps up where we're at today. So Blaine, I want to thank you, and Scott, thank you for being here today. I'm going to ask Zareen, is there anything else that we need to go over?
Contact information. If you guys are interested in learning more about mortgages, what we offer here, please reach out to our email, which is info@michiganfirstmortgage.com. You may also apply on our website. We have over 30 qualified loan officers all across the state of Michigan. If you want to speak to someone immediately, you can call our 800-664 number. So it's 800-664-3828 and choose mortgage. And you can speak to any one of our qualified loan officers. And if you'd like to speak to Scott directly, his contact information is on this slide as well. Blaine, our appraiser, thank you again for jumping on the call. If you have any questions or general questions, I want to learn more about Blaine. His contact information is here as well. We are also connected with Michigan First Insurance. They are based out through Michigan First. They are a great place to call if you're interested in shopping out your homeowner's insurance, your car insurance, your boat insurance, your pet insurance. They'll be more than happy to help you with any type of quote that you have. And just on a side note, I know I shop ours out every single year, and every year I save ourselves money. So please look into that if that's something that you feel that will benefit you. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for jumping on the call today. This call has been recorded, and you can find it on our website, michiganfirst.com, under mortgages, along with some other recordings that we do have on our previous calls. And if you're interested in jumping on our next one next month, please do so as well and register there. Thanks again, everyone, for jumping on the call, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.